Welcome to the ISO Show, dispelling myths and sharing tips for success to improve your business with ISO standards.
If you're listening to this podcast, then you're in great company. We've got thousands of listeners who have a thirst for continual improvement and raising standards in business. Whether your interest is in quality, sustainability, or risk standards, I'd love to welcome you as a member to our online platform for all things ISO, the ISology Hub. The ISology Hub is the leading place to get access to all of your online resources, from in-depth training courses, through to our very popular coffee break training, to templates and action plans and many other resources to help raise standards. As a member, you get access to over 100 courses, taking you from learner to practitioner to leader. The ISology Hub has all the resources that you need, which will really help to make your life easier and to help improve compliance in those business critical areas. So if you'd like access to learning and compliance resources ranging from data privacy to environmental management, anti-bribery, business continuity, quality, health and safety, to name just but a few, the list is endless actually, then we'd love for you to come and join us. Just head over to the isologyhub.com.
Hello, and welcome to the ISO Show. I'm Steph Churchman, and I'm the Communications Manager for Blackmores. Today, I'm going to be discussing the changes to the Sustainable Event Management Standard, ISO 2012-1-2024, in addition to outlining what you should be updating ahead of your transition to the latest version of the standard. So before I begin, I'll give you a bit of background to ISO 2012-1. The Standard for Sustainable Events Management was originally created and launched in coordination with the London 2012 Olympics. Now, the big push to put sustainability at the heart of this event was in the works since 2007. It was derived from the WWF and bioregional concept of One Planet Living, which encapsulated the challenges facing us in the UK in very stark terms. That being, if everybody in the world lived the same lifestyle as we do in the UK, we would need 3 planets worth of resources to support us, which is a really, really worrying thought. It highlighted just how wasteful we were as a nation. But the 2012 Olympic Games was seen as a chance for us to show that we can make meaningful changes in the way we work and do business. When it came to planning the 2012 Olympic Games, they took a step back and considered the impact of required development and construction on biodiversity, as well as how they could reduce their greenhouse gas emissions and general waste in the preparation and running of the event. It really was a novel concept at the time. Carbon reporting and reduction is a lot more commonplace now than it was in 2012, so this was a really heavily promoted aspect of the event at the time. And honestly, it did set a precedent for the future. 12 years on, it seems only fitting that its next revision would be applied to the 2024 Paris Olympic Games. For those who aren't very familiar with the standard, ISO 2012-1 specifies the requirements for an event sustainability management system to improve the sustainability of events. The standard applies to all types of organisations involved in the events industry, from caterers, lighting and sound engineers, security companies, stage builders and venues, to independent event organisers and corporate and public sector event teams. It's not just a standard for huge events like the Olympics, it can be applied to much smaller events. So that's just a bit of context for you in regards to ISO 2012-1 itself. So let's move on to what's new with the 2024 version of the standard. At a very high level, one of the biggest and most welcome changes is the fact that the standard is now aligned with the familiar high-level structure that many other ISO standards follow. This means it will be much easier to integrate this standard with an existing ISO management system such as ISO 9001 or ISO 14001. Next, there is a bigger focus on climate change, legacy, and human rights. These elements weren't necessarily missing from the previous version, but they weren't a key focus either. So let's take a look at each of these in a bit more detail. On the climate change focus, ISO 2012-1-2024 now explicitly requires considering climate change and its impact on your event and stakeholders. So this might involve carbon emission reduction strategies and adapting to potential climate-related disruptions. Biodiversity may also fall under this, especially if your events require construction or take place in an outside venue such as a park or field. Now, if this sounds familiar, it's likely because an element of climate change consideration has been applied to 31 popular ISO standards earlier this year. ISO 2012-1 naturally dives deeper into this as it is a sustainability standard, but this is just a reminder to all of those that haven't addressed the climate change amendment to do so ASAP, as it has come into effect immediately. If you'd like to learn more about that, we covered the updates in episode 174, and we have a workshop recording available on our YouTube channel which goes into more detail about the actions you can take to address it. But in regard to ISO 2012-1 specifically, what does this focus on climate change mean for certified companies? Well, firstly, it provides an opportunity for event professionals and event organisers to demonstrate leadership in taking action around climate change, which can only be a good thing. However, since this standard is about credibility of sustainability, the certified organisations are required to ensure that any carbon offsetting completed via carbon credits are credible. There's sadly a lot of carbon offsetting schemes out there that aren't doing what they say they're doing, so some due diligence is involved in selecting them. And lastly, the updated standard facilitates the process of taking credible action and aligns ISO 2012-1 with big changes relating to climate change. The new version also expands beyond environmental concerns to encompass human and child rights, social impact including mental health and diversity, and digital responsibility. Your management system will need to address these aspects throughout the event lifecycle. Specific reference on human rights was lacking in the earlier version of the standard, which again, a bit worrying. In fact, FIFA was the first sports body to publish a human rights policy in line with UN human rights guiding principles back in 2017. So rest assured that the 2024 Paris Olympic and Paralympic Games will have human rights integrated directly into the contracts. So what does this increased focus on human rights in ISO 2012-1 mean for certified organisations? Well, now it includes explicit reference to UN guiding principles on business and human rights, which you will need to demonstrate and adhere to. The revised standard also now references social impact in its definitions. For example, you can find this in the definition of sustainable development and stewardship. Also, the inclusion of Annex D, which is guidance on human rights and child rights, will be an important step in considering human and child rights across the global event industry. A key part of this guidance states that event organisers should consult with human and child rights experts and conduct a human rights assessment to identify potential risks to the people as a result of the event and its surrounding activities. It also states that you should publish a human rights policy to ensure that human rights consideration is embedded in the whole life cycle of an event. And lastly on this section, what does an increased focus on legacy mean for certified organisations? In short, it provides an opportunity to event organisers to focus not only on the few days of the event delivery, but also supports in creating enduring results for the hosting community. So, for example, creating an economic impact on the local population. This could be by providing the opportunity to acquire new skills, to share best practice on how to do events in a more sustainable way, or by improving a public place close to the event.
Are you new to ISO standards and want to know what it's all about? Or maybe your company has multiple ISO standards, but there's a lack of engagement and compliance. Whether it's quality, sustainability, or risk standards, the Isology Hub is your one-stop shop for all your online learning resources associated with raising your company's standards. From as little as £99 a month, you can have unlimited access to hundreds of online training courses and achieve certification for completion of courses along the way, which will take you from learner to practitioner to leader in no time. So what courses are in the Hub? Well, there are courses on everything a head of quality, sustainability, information security and health and safety would need to manage compliance and raise standards. With over 100 courses available to you, here are examples of just a few. ISO 9001 Internal Auditor, how to transition to the new ISO 27001 standard, the role of ESG in quality management, and how to integrate management systems. But it's not just courses in the Isology Hub. You can access templates, downloads, and action checklists to take your business to the next level. So why not try the Isology Hub today? Just click on the link at www.isologyhub.com and you'll get access to all our resources within minutes. If you're interested in embedding best practice across your organisation or would like to develop an awareness and training programme for employees, we offer a free learning and development session to tailor a bespoke training programme based on your organisation's needs. So we'd love for you to join as an Isology Hub member. Just head over to isologyhub.com to get access to your unlimited training and compliance resources.
Now, I'm not going to detail each and every clause and their specific changes because, quite honestly, most of them have received slight tweaks in some shape, way or form, but I will summarise a few more key updates, including a strengthening of stakeholder engagement. The standard now emphasises demonstrating sustainability throughout your supply chain. This might involve you requesting proof of sustainability practices from vendors and incorporating ethical sourcing practices, which I think can only be a good thing, potentially expanding the sustainability influence down the line if this is an area where some suppliers may be lacking. The definition of stakeholders has now also been expanded to include partners and sponsors, so you'll need to consider how their sustainability practices align with your event's goals. And lastly, on stakeholders, the policy clause now requires reporting on your sustainability achievements and lessons learned. So building a system for tracking and reporting these aspects will be crucial, and will likely involve a lot more communication between your stakeholders to gather any necessary data for reporting purposes. The next big improvement is alignment and flexibility. As I mentioned earlier, the standard aligns with other management system standards thanks to the high-level structure update, making integration easier for organizations with existing management systems. The revised standard also caters to events of all sizes and complexities, allowing for adaptation to your specific needs. And lastly, there's now alignment with global frameworks, like the UN Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement. So, you can consider incorporating relevant goals from these frameworks into your event strategy. There's really no reason not to. There's a lot of solid and worthwhile elements of both frameworks, and I'd encourage you to look into them further. We actually did a little mini-series on the Sustainable Development Goals a while back, so go back and give episodes 106, 107 and 108 a listen if you'd like to learn more. So that's a very high-level overview of the key changes, but what does this mean for you? Well, as I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, the fact that ISO standards go through this review and revision process once every 7 years on average. This one had a bit of a longer break, but regardless, anyone certified to the 2012 version of the standard will have until the 31st of March 2027 to transition to the latest 2024 version. If you don't, you'll risk losing your certification, and you'll have to go through the whole Stage 1 and Stage 2 assessment process again to get that certificate back, which can obviously be quite costly, and I know you don't want to deal with that. So what do you need to do to transition? I'm only going to give you a very high-level overview, and then we'll take a look at some specific tasks. So, starting with, first, review and conduct a gap analysis. This is to compare your existing system against the new standards requirements to identify areas that need improvement. Next, you'll need to update your policies and procedures, specifically your event sustainability policy, to reflect the broader range of sustainability issues and incorporate reporting requirements. Next, you'll need to develop a plan to engage with a wider range of stakeholders, including sponsors and partners, on sustainability initiatives. Next, you'll need to look at your supply chain management. This will involve establishing or updating procedures for assessing and integrating sustainability practices throughout your vendor network. Then you'll need to address training and awareness. Any and all changes should be communicated. Educate your team on the new standards requirements and integrate them into event planning and execution processes. And then, of course, lastly, you'll need to audit against the new standard and prepare for your transition assessment. I appreciate this is quite a broad overview, so I will break this down into some specific tasks that will need completing. Starting with how to address promoting human rights and children's rights. First, I would recommend updating your event sustainability policy to explicitly state your commitment to respecting human rights and children's rights throughout the event lifecycle. Next, you should update your risk assessments, as you're going to need to identify potential human rights risks associated with your event, such as discrimination in hiring or unfair labour practices within the supply chain. I'd also advise that you look into developing mitigation strategies to address these risks. On that, you'll need to take a closer look at your supplier management, as you'll need to ensure your suppliers uphold human rights standards. This could involve requiring proof of ethical sourcing practices or conducting audits. You should also engage with relevant stakeholders like human rights organisations or local communities to understand potential human rights concerns and incorporate their feedback into your planning. A few other actions you could do include partnering with organisations to promote fair labour practices and human rights, including human rights clauses in contracts with suppliers and partners, conducting training for staff on identifying and mitigating human rights risks, and finally, implementing a grievance process for reporting potential human rights violations. Now, let's move on to tackling the new focus on legacy. You should integrate legacy planning into the early stages of event development. So consider aspects like infrastructure. This could be temporary structures or repurposing existing facilities. Also workforce development. For example, training opportunities for local communities. And universal accessibility for people with disabilities. Next, you should develop metrics to measure the positive legacy of your event. This could involve tracking the number of jobs created, increased accessibility measures implemented, or infrastructure donated to the community. Also consider the potential to partner with local organisations to ensure the event's legacy benefits the community in the long term. This might involve collaborating on infrastructure projects or workforce development initiatives. You should also conduct a post-event impact assessment to evaluate the event's legacy. Lastly, the standard now requires reporting on the social, economic, and environmental impacts of your event. So how can you go about this? The first step should be to develop a reporting framework. This framework should consider relevant metrics for social elements like job creation and diversity, economic elements like local business involvement, and environmental impacts such as your carbon footprint or your waste generation. Next, you need to implement a system for collecting and analysing data related to your event's social, economic, and environmental performance. And lastly, choose appropriate communication channels for your sustainability report, such as your website, annual reports, or dedicated sustainability reports. If you're scratching your head on exactly how to complete this, look into reporting tools and platforms designed specifically for event sustainability reporting. You could also partner with sustainability consultants, such as Blackmores, to develop a comprehensive reporting framework. Also, just a reminder that you will need to regularly review and update your reporting framework to reflect evolving best practices. ISO 201 has continual improvement at its heart, just like any other ISO standard. It's not meant to be a static system. So, I hope this has given you an insight into the changes to ISO 2012-1-2024. I'd recommend purchasing a copy so you can review the specific changes yourself, in addition to reviewing the updated guidance provided in the annexes. If you'd like some help with your transition, we're always here to help, so feel free to contact us. We'll also have some training resources available on the ISOlogy Hub in the coming months, so don't forget to sign up to our newsletter to get news on when those become available. Before I go, I'd just like to remind you to like and subscribe on your preferred media player, and if you have a moment to spare, leave us a nice shiny 5-star review, as these really do help us to reach a wider audience. So that's it from me today. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to catching up with you on the next ISO show.
Looking to use ISO standards to drive better business practice? Contact us at blackmoresuk.com to access further information and book your free 15-minute call.